recording version. Thank you very much for being here. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone that is here with us. We're going to be recording this session, if that's okay with you, so other people can see it, and we will also be broadcasting this on Facebook, which also other people are going to be joining us through there. So thank you very much for being here. Really, I have to say this is a luxury panel. And well, I'm gonna start us off by introducing myself. My name is Ignacio Lopez. I'm a project director at CACIF, which is the coordinating committee of agricultural, commercial, industrial, and financial organizations of Guatemala. So it is really great to be here. And just a bit of context in all of this. This is possible due to the YEO, or Youth Economic Opportunities 2030, which is the flagship program of an NGO from the US, which is called Making Sense International. And they each year they host the Global YEO Summit, which, for example, last year it was fully online, and we created what we know as 8 work groups, and one of those was the private sector leadership work group. This is one that we have been participating with Junior Achievement Americas, CAN Global, the Federation of Employers of Pakistan, Swiss Contact, Labor Amplified from South Africa, and also IMLIS from India. It really has been an honor working alongside with all of you guys for the last year. And what we have been working on is basically being able to close the gap between the private sector and what is the youth, since most of the time they're speaking like different languages. For example, private sector want to approach youth, but doesn't know how to perhaps make their sectors more attractive for them. Or perhaps also youth wants to approach private sector by getting their first job and else, but they don't know how. So that's something we've been working on, and something that, like, the main key of what we've been doing is promotion, sensibilization, standardization, and else of what we know as work-based learning programs. And that's something, well, that we will be talking a bit more in this panel. So without further ado, first of all, thank you very much for all for being here. And I'm going to start introducing our panelists. And I'm going to start with Marcela. Marcela Bonifaz. She's 21 years old from Guatemala. She's a third-year student at Francisco Marroquín University. And she is currently doing an internship at the organized private sector, specifically in the projects unit, which includes things such as education, entrepreneurship, social development. And in addition, she's part of the organizing staff of the International Forum of Entrepreneurs in the country. And with her studies, the work-based learning program in which she is volunteering for an important forum in the country, she wants to really change Guatemala. So it's going to be our youth perspective. Marcela, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you,
it's an honor to have you.
And good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Marcela. We also have Jasmine Emery. She is Junior Achievements Americas Development Director, and she is coordinating the organization's regional partnerships and funding activities. JA is actually the largest nonprofit organization in the world dedicated to youth empowerment and preparing young people for the world of work. Jasmine is a senior professional with experience in sustainability and social investment management, public affairs, and communications. Also, management consulting. She is passionate about developing multi-stakeholder partnerships and dialogues to promote social development and positive public policy change. So again, Jasmine, thank you very much for being here, and it is really an honor to have you here.
Thank you. Gracias, Ignacio. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jasmine. We also have Yanni de Villiers. She has 18 years of labor relations experience as a trade union organizer, and thereafter a labor policy specialist for organized agriculture, to complement also her LLM degree in labor law. Yanni completed an intermediate course on employee relations and human resources management at the AOTS in Tokyo, Japan in 2018. She also represents organized business as a national minimum wage commissioner, as well as a board member of the National Skills Authority in South Africa. And she will also represent Business Unity South Africa at the 111th session of the International Labor Conference, specifically in the standard-setting discussion on quality apprenticeships. Yanni was also chosen as one of Male and Guardians Women Changing South Africa in 2019, and she is a chartered human resources professional. Thank you, Yanni, for being here. I think your experience is going to be great for this panel.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. It's lovely to be here with you.
Thank you, Yanni. Last but not least, we also have Cristina Hueco. She is an engagement and outreach manager at GAN Global, GAN or Global Apprenticeship Network, and she's working on the promotion of work-based learning, including apprenticeships with both public and private stakeholders. Christina joined GAN in 2015, bringing in several years of experience working with corporate partners on advancing the SDGs and international development work with UN organizations and NGOs on international trade policy. She is a Swiss, American, and Philippine national with 3 kids, of which 2 are teenagers, and she tries her best to instill principles of lifelong learning and a skills-first mindset, both at work and at home. So thank you very much, Christina, also for your availability and disposition. It is really an honor to have you here.
Thank you. Likewise, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thanks so much, Ignacio.
Thank you. So if you want, if you guys are okay with it, we can start this by a first round of questions. What we want, as I said, is to be able to get to know what have we been doing, what do we identify as the challenges and opportunities of work-based learning in order for close the gap between youth and private sector. So I'm going to start us off with Marcela. Marcela, I'm going to read you the question, and please feel free to answer it. You have 3 minutes for it. In your perspective, as a young woman, do you consider that applying for your first job is a complex process? And if so, can you tell us a bit about your experience? We can have a bit of context regarding, well, what's the youth perspective around this subject?
Okay, I think that it is a very complex process because all of the requirements that the jobs ask for. There are a few obstacles. For example, if you are still in university, probably you don't have a lot of work experience yet. However, many employers prefer to hire candidates with some level of experience, even for entry-level positions. As well, we can see that depending on your field of study, you may not have developed like the specific skills or knowledge that are required for certain jobs. Employers may prefer candidates with a degree or specialized training in particular fields. Likewise, each year, more young people of productive age are added to the potential labor force. Then there is like a race in search of a job opportunity. So the number of people with college degrees is increasing, which means that the number of professionals seeking employment is increasing too. This can create a lot of competition for a viable job positions. In addition, as a student, your availability to work may be limited to your class calendar and other commitments, and this can make it difficult to find a job that fits your calendar and meets an employer's needs. Besides, as a university student, you may not have a large professional network like to draw upon when seeking a job opportunities. So networking, I think it can be crucial for finding an employment, especially in certain industries, because if you don't have network, you don't know where to apply. So based on my experience, I can say that applying for a first job is a complex process, since the job offers that are presented, including those that come through the faculty of my career at the university, require a minimum of 2 years of work experience. Therefore, this discourages you from continuing the process of applying for a job and generates like a little bit of anxiety about the future. But I think it is necessary also, because applying for a job while studying in university can provide numerous benefits. It can help you prepare for your future career, develop important skills, and gain valuable experiences and also connections. So I found out that there is a solution to stand out among so many university students, and that at the same time have this work experience when applying for a job. And this solution, I think, is to do internships during the study period, which counteracts this difficulty of getting a job after graduating from university, and also has many benefits beyond that, such as strengthening work experience and make this networking. but there are also other solutions, like, for example, actively seeking out career fairs or volunteering in events, so you can make the network.
Thank you, Marcela. Yeah, I think it's getting really, really competitive. I think no matter where you are, it is really getting competitive out there. And it's going to be interesting what the other answers might enlighten on us on what you mentioned. How can youth get ahead on these subjects as such? Like the first thing I think would be the experience. So thank you very much for that, Marcela. Then I'm going with you, Jasmine. And in the same lines, like, what do you think about her response? Like the question as such is, what are the youth trends about work? What do you think, like, personally, and from JA, what do you guys think is their dynamic? Do they work? Do they get into work-based learning programs? Like, what do a youth or a youthful person wants to get out of a work-based learning program, a first job? What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would like again to recognize what Marcela just reported, which is that many young people, many students find it hard to find a first job. So I want to recognize that, you know, youth unemployment has become a global challenge. It's 20% of the youth population in the age of working that who are unemployed, and this is just double the rate that than 2 decades ago. So it's a huge social challenge, and I think that the first trend is what you mentioned, Marcela, as a solution. Work-based learning is becoming very relevant because it's a bridge, you know, between youth and the job market. So it can be apprenticeship, it can be internship, or it can be also shadowing experience. We from at JA, we do provide hands-on, very experiential learning programs to students, where also, and I think that's one more element where corporate volunteers play a key role, not only acting as instructors, but also as role models and mentors. And this definitely help young students to improve or to work on their self-perception and preparedness for the job market. So work-based learning programs is one first trend. A second trend that we see also is entrepreneurship. You see many young people, you know, deciding to open their own ventures, their own businesses, or just become self-employed. So, and again, here we need to recognize that you can be an entrepreneur by choice, but sometimes also by force, because you don't find a job. So I think that's the second trend. And then I would like to mention maybe two additional trends that are more related to work style. The first one is flexibility. You know, I mean, it's not only the young people, but definitely young people want to work with more flexibility. And this includes also the possibility to work remotely. So I do work with, the regional office of junior achievement. I'm based in São Paulo, Brazil, but my team is spread out of the region. You know, I'm working with people in Argentina, in Honduras, in Panama, in Peru. And so I think that's definitely a trend and an expectation from the youth. And last but not least, very important, I think that young people do look to organizations which purpose is aligned with their own values. So this is a new pressure, a new source of pressure for the companies, but definitely young people look at social responsibility, environmental responsibility, diversity, flexibility as, you know, key factors when it comes to find and to decide for a job. I think there is a nice survey from Deloitte on millennials and Gen Z's expectation towards work, and the study mentions that almost 50% of this youth population has made choices or think that they would decide for a job based on their ethics and beliefs. So key trends to consider.
Thank you, Jasmine. Yeah, I think we can just like sum up, like the first trend would be work-based learning, a second trend would be entrepreneurship, and a third trend would be all of that flexibility and all the key factors to make like the sectors a bit more attractive for youth. I think that's really interesting. Actually, for example, and I know this happens a lot in Latin America, but for example, for Guatemala is one of the top countries, if not the one that has most entrepreneurs. But I think that it exactly responds to what you were mentioning, that it also depends on whether they are becoming entrepreneurs due to necessity or due to because they want to. So that's really interesting, and thank you for bringing it up. So continuing on, so we have Cristina. Cristina, if we could, like, this next question is to be able to understand, well, okay, we already have like the youth perspective, we have the private sector and the NGOs perspective. I would ask you, like, what's the connection between them? So how can a WBL, a work-based learning, help young people with the transition to the workplace? Or even if it does help, how can it help?
Okay, thanks for that question, Ignacio. I would have to say, in building from also Yasmin's point, I am, of course, in the camp of promoting work-based learning. Whether that work-based learning is in the form of an apprenticeship, an internship, a traineeship, the great thing about it is it all happens in the workplace, meaning that this is an active way to learn. So through a work-based learning program, as a young person, you're exposed to so many different activities in the workplace. So that includes things like group work, peer-to-peer engagement, problem solving, case studies, simulations, and project management, and that's just to name a few. All of these experiences, they encourage a young person to be active participants in the learning process, rather than just passive recipients. So work-based learning, and especially if they are well-structured and aligned to labor market needs, such as that of apprenticeship, they can also help young people to overcome what Marcela was referring to earlier, the work and experience trap. So apprenticeships can guide young people to identify also who their future employers could be. You can, as a young person, you can earn while you learn. You gain work experience and skills. Also, you can earn nationally recognized certifications. You forego the cost of debt from university, depending on the country context, especially. You get to know firsthand company ways of working and culture. So these are just a few of the benefits for young people, whether they are a student, an apprentice, an intern, or a trainee. But I also wanted to point out the benefits of work-based learning for employers, which are also quite varied. There are numerous studies by governments and organizations, such as the ILO, the International Labor Organization, who is our founding partner, that show the positive benefits from work-based learning and how it outweighs the costs, whether the company is a big company or a small company. And that the return on investment is even better for a company if it decides to hire the apprentice, the intern, or the learner afterwards. For the employer, they can also access talent, acquire innovation and creativity from the young generation. In some countries, employers can even receive tax credits and financial incentives. If the employer hires the apprentice, trainee or trainee afterwards, this also lowers the HR and administrative burden for the company. For governments, the benefits are also numerous because it directly addresses the skills mismatch issue. It tackles youth unemployment directly. Work-based learning, especially apprenticeships, this is what we would call a triple win for everybody. It's a win for young people, a win for employers, and a win for governments.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cristina. I think that's something that's a key factor for a work-based learning program to work. I think, for example, for a student that it's entering work-based learning, they said, well, I don't want that, I want my first job or else. For the private sector, they might say, well, I'm already investing in the public education, for example, or something like that. Why should I continue to develop the youth? But I think that's really interesting what you said, and it's gotta be on a win-win-win situation. And with that in mind, I turn to you, Yanni, and specifically, like, similar question in the sense of what are some of these youth benefits that can be gained from the implementation of work-based learning programs? But I think we should focus on what Cristina said about the win-win-win. So how can these programs contribute to the advancement of society as a whole? Do you think they can help? And if so, how can they help?
I think not only can they help, I think they must help. I think, I mean, if I take my country as an example, from what I've heard now, it's so interesting to hear what Marcela said in terms of it being a struggle to find work for young people. In my country, the youth unemployment rate peaked at about 50% a few years ago, and it hasn't gone down significantly. And I think we are fooling ourselves by thinking that we can continue business as usual while we have this massive looming problem. And then on the other hand, as a geriatric millennial myself, I'm so filled with hope when I deal with Gen Z and I see what young people can bring to a workplace. And I think there's no negotiation. This is something that needs to happen. And now just to build on the wonderful points that Cristina has made as well, to say that by implementing work-based learning programs, you actually give young people networking opportunities that they wouldn't have had necessarily, because the world of work has changed. And I think all of us who have been in the situation where we have changed jobs over the past few years have been there, where we've had to rely very heavily on networks. Now, if you take a country like mine as an example, if you look at our general unemployment rate, not even just our youth unemployment rate, you are talking about people who come from families where nobody works, where there isn't a network, where there isn't anyone to fall back on, and there isn't necessarily that safeguard that you would have in a different context, in a different country, in a different society. So these networking opportunities that young people get when they are involved in work-based, I'm going to keep stumbling, work-based learning programs, it's absolutely invaluable. It's not something that can be replicated in any other way. And I want to couple that with things like personal and professional development as well. These programs promote personal and professional growth because it helps young individuals to develop a strong work ethic, professionalism, time management skills, teamwork, and effective communication skills as well. If you look at that, it feeds into confidence building, which is so incredibly important when you go into a workplace. And I sometimes think the things we expect of young people are things that I, again, as a geriatric millennial, haven't even mastered myself at all stages in all contexts. We expect poised professional people, but we're dealing with people who have either just finished schooling or just finished their studies, and we expect them to fit seamlessly into workplaces. I think it's completely unrealistic. And a work-based learning program can bridge that gap, which is incredibly important. It equips young people with practical skills and then industry exposure, of course. There's valuable experience, and that enhances their career prospects at the end of the day and empowers them to make informed decisions about their own careers, which I think if we look at that Deloitte study, that is something that's also very, very important. Young people want to they want to make their own decisions. They want to come to a conclusion about their own careers, and they want that freedom. And I think that's something that is again a non-negotiable.
Thank you, Jenny. I think that's a really innovative way to think, and I think that's what we need to be doing in order to close the gap between private sector and youth. And I'm really, really glad that we are just like doing a perfect circle on the fact that you were also supporting what Marcela said at the beginning of network opportunities, industry exposure, which, like, if it's not through work-based learning, it's really, really difficult to be able to get those experiences. So thank you very much, Gianni, for that. And well, up next, yes.
May I mean, when listening to Gianni, it echoes a key concept we work with at Junior Achievement, which is the concept of self-efficacy, which is really at the core of our theory of change. And we understand that work-based learning and experiential learning help students to develop their self-efficacy. And so self-efficacy is one's belief that your plans can turn into actions that can turn into success. And studies show that it's even more self-efficacy is more predictive of success than, education sometimes, or even past experiences. So it's really related to your to self-effectiveness and to self-confidence, and definitely work-based learning is key to that. So I'm with you on that.
Thank you, Jasmine. Yeah, it is really interesting. I remember like a couple of months ago, I was talking with someone from the private sector, and they were telling me that like the main thing that decides if a person, like if a young person is going to be working at the company or not, or if they're going to keep working, it's not the technical things that they know, because those things you can learn, but the soft skills are really the main important thing. And I think, as you mentioned, like through work-based learning programs, you can get those. So thank you very much, Jasmine, for that. Now that I have you, I'm gonna ask you the following question. This round 2 is a bit more practical, so like we're gonna deep dive on more of the challenges and what can we do to help. So according to you, what are the obstacles that the private sector has in order to insert young people into the labor market, and vice versa? And like for the young people into the labor market, I think we already talked about, but if you could also elaborate on that, and what are the obstacles for private sector?
Okay, so I may be repetitive, but again, I want to, we know we have this dual challenge or dual crisis. So on the one hand, you have 40% of employers reporting that they struggle to fill in entry-level jobs because of the lack of skilled labor, of skills on the markets. And on the other hand, you have 70% more or less of young people that struggle a lot to find a first job. And we conducted a study with Manpower here in Latin America, but I think it's a global key conclusion. When you ask young people why they are not hired, they didn't find a first job, it's because they mentioned that they were not hired because of a lack of experience. Just what Marcela told us at the very beginning of this webinar. So and so that's why again, work-based learning programs are so crucial, so relevant at this very moment. But besides that, both employers and job seekers say that the lack of proficiency in English or foreign language is also a key obstacle, and the lack of technical skills. But now, with that, we know that today 45% of jobs today are at risk because of technology and automation. The World Economic Forum says that 65% of children entering a primary school today will have a job that doesn't exist today. So I think that companies also don't only invest a lot in reskilling the labor force, but upskilling, the young worker or the young students, the young worker entering the job, the workforce. So these are, I would say, maybe 2 or 3 key obstacles we see, and reaffirming the importance of work-based learning, of having the opportunity, to experiment and to have an experience.
Thank you very much, Jasmine, for that. It's really eye-opening and incredible to get those kind of statistics and facts. It really blows my mind. But going over to you, Yanni, since I read your bio, you're a private sector expert, professional with the organized private sector in the country, and also global one. I would ask you if for example, if you're okay with Jasmine's response, what should be the role of private sector in these work-based learning programs? Do you think it should be more active? Do you think we're doing okay? Or what should do, like, private sector is listening to us right now, what would the recommendation be for them?
That's always a dangerous position to be in, because you know that the reaction, please don't commit us to more. We don't know if we can do more.
It does happen, yeah.
Absolutely. So I think the fact is, if we want change, we have to make sure that we are that change, that we are at the forefront of the change. And what I've seen in South Africa specifically is if the private sector lags behind, then decisions get made on behalf of the private sector that the private sector cannot live with. So my first port of call would be that there needs to be very, very close collaboration between private sector and all the different role players within the skills landscape that are responsible for rolling out work-based learning programs. Now, the first one to my mind would be education providers, because the private sector can collaborate with educational institutions like your schools and your colleges and vocational training centers as well to design work-based learning programs that align with industry needs. Because what we've seen in my country and in our context is that we train for the sake of training. We train because I am in one of those countries where we do get tax incentives for training, where we are encouraged to do it. But then we train and train and train, and people get caught in this internship cycle in South Africa, where they do internship upon internship, but they never get to a permanent placement because they're not learning the skills that is what the industry needs at that particular time. Another thing is providing the actual work opportunities. It's difficult in a context where we are globally, financially, there are massive constraints in the different countries that we represent. So having unrestrained growth and unrestrained, potential for creating jobs is just not in the cards at the moment. But in South Africa, we also have to be honest about the fact that where we have had economic growth, we have not seen the job growth to go along with it. So it is definitely going to have to be a conscious push from all the different role players, private sector included, to create those work opportunities for young people.
Thank you very much, Yanni. I think it's really interesting what you mentioned, that like the private sector might get left behind if they're not participating actively in this. And it's really interesting. For example, this was a couple of years ago. I remember the TC David, they told me that the private sector has to be in the conductor seat, right? Because at the end of the day, like they're the ones mainly executing these programs. And also, I just want to highlight another point you made about, for example, the situation in South Africa, which I totally can relate. But it's not only the promotion of apprenticeships, the promotion of internships, the promotion of traineeships. We also have to promote quality apprenticeships, quality internships, so that they get the best of it, and also the private sector also gets the best of it. So thank you very much for that, Yanni. I think with Jasmine and Yanni's answer, we covered this round for the private sector. Now I'm going to turn to Marcela to be able to understand a bit about the educational sector. So regarding the education sector, Marcela, do you consider they're providing the skills needed in the labor market? Like, do you feel prepared for getting a job? Do you think that there's still a gap that the educational sector should cover, or what do you think about that?
Well, I think, as Johnny said, that work world has changed and will keep changing. And also, as Jasmine said, there are many jobs that will cease to exist due to all the artificial intelligence and so on. So the education sector must constantly innovate the teachings of its students so that they can be prepared for the job market. The education sector plays a really important role in providing all the skills needed in this labor market, but there can be some challenges in ensuring that the skills taught align with the demands of the labor market. So because of that, I think that there should be like a match between the education sector and the private sector. But I think they should be coordinated on what it is taught. In this way, young people can benefit more and be trained for the labor market. And so in order to be successful in the workforce, individuals need a range of skills, including technical and soft skills. Technical skills refer, like we know, to specific job-related knowledge and abilities, while soft skills refer to non-technical skills, such as communication, problem solving, and also teamwork, for example. So the education sector can provide these technical skills through vocational and technical training programs, as well as through traditional academic programs in fields such like in science or technology. But these soft skills are so important because of the labor market. These skills are often developed through experiential learning opportunities, such as internships like I do. And personally, when I graduated from college, I didn't feel quite ready for college, nor looking for a part-time job. So now that I'm in college, I feel even less prepared because I know that the job market is like in a deeper way. I know what the job market is, and that creates like more anxiety about my future. So in order to be more confident when applying for a first job, it is necessary that the education sector teach the necessary techniques and also promote these work-based learning programs so the youth can acquire technical and also soft skills.
Thank you, Marcela. First of all, I think you're doing great. So thank you very much for being here. Just like accepting this invitation, it really speaks loud about what you're doing. And in response of what you mentioned, I think really spot on answer in regard of what the educational sector and the private sector should be doing. Like that's such a win-win relationship also. Like private sector benefits of having more prepared people, and also the educational sector can assure that they, by teaching these things that the private sector demands, they're going to be able to assure basically a job for their students when they graduate or even when they're still studying. So thank you very much for that, Marcela. So again, in this round, we covered private sector. We're covering right now the educational sector. I turn to you, Cristina, to be able to answer a bit more about like what kind of policies as such need to be put in place so that employers can create more WBL programs. And as such, as we're talking about the educational sector, how can we also make those alliances through these types of policies? Can you talk about some of that, please?
Thank you, Ignacio. Okay, so I think the policies that need to be put in place, I think first and foremost, they need to directly address the skills mismatch issue, and also recognize the fact, as also the previous speakers had said, Marcela also, that education and training opportunities, they need to be better aligned with the labor market. Because a young person today, and Marcela, you touched upon the complexities, we have factors such as globalization, changing demographics, digitization, urbanization, virtual work arrangements, informal employment, and climate change. All of this compounded, we need the policies to not just address skills mismatch, but skills mismatch within this very complex context. So anyone today entering the workforce understands that to be able to really contribute to the workplace, we need continuous training. So if you're going straight from school to the workplace, you might realize that schooling may not have prepared you in the best way for the needs of the workforce, and also for such a complex world. So I'm going back to a figure from one of our founding partners, the OECD. According to their studies, 2 out of 5 employees are affected by skills mismatch. And on a global level, that affects 1.3 billion people. So in terms of what can employers do to help, very simply, it's to offer more work-based learning opportunities. Employers can also consider hiring people based on their skills. I think it was Marcela that you had mentioned earlier about maybe they focus too much on university degrees for certain professions? What if employers based their hiring decisions mostly on skills, competencies, but also your potential to learn? I think also on an individual level, we have a responsibility. It's important that we develop this continuous learning mindset. It's like advocating for your own health, right? We take our health seriously. So why not become advocates for your own learning pathway by considering a work-based learning program? In terms of what governments can do on policies, they can support education systems that consider the needs of employers and the labor markets. Yasmin had also pointed to some figures about new jobs that have emerged just over the past 15 years at a phenomenal rate, with certain technical skills already obsolete within 2 to 5 years. As Yanni was saying, also as a geriatric millennial, for us, 2 to 5 years really is a blink of the eye. And while the job and labor market has transformed at a fast pace, our education and our training systems are actually the same since the last century. So in a nutshell, if each of us can do one thing to promote work-based learning policies, it would be this. And that would be for individuals to consider work-based learning, to add to their lifelong learning mindset, to take reign of their own professional development. It would be for employers to consider offering work-based learning to cultivate the talent that they need. And also to hire on skills, based on skills, competencies, and a potential to learn. For governments, it would be to support education systems that integrate the needs of the labor market and to also guarantee access to individuals for their learning development, which would make them more employable at the end of the day.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you very much for that. I think that as the previous round just supports the argument on win-win-win. And that's what I get from this round, like private sector, educational sector, and also government has or have to work together. Also, I can add NGOs, international cooperation field, and else. Like we really do need to be working on this together. Like really the challenges we have, the skills mismatch you mentioned, for example, if we get a degree of 4 years, like the things we learn in the first year, when we graduate are obsolete by then. So we really do have to be innovative and do have that communication between these sectors. So thank you very much, Christina, for that. And for the last round, we're running out of time. So I would please ask if we could keep short our answers, perhaps in less than a minute and a half. But I would go with Jasmine, and this in a context of what you already mentioned, for example, the Deloitte study, also the manpower that GA did. The question is, how do you incorporate these latest trends and demands of the industry in your programs to ensure that young people are well prepared for the workforce? And this also, like for a recommendation of everyone that's hearing us, like for example, for me, how can I grab that Deloitte study, that manpower study, and be able to like get into it so I can ensure that young people are well prepared for the workforce?
Okay, I want to again go back to what Christina just said, which is, we need to bridge or to match the skills mismatch. And so we at JA, we are in a privileged situation. We do work a lot with the private sector. 90% of our partners are private companies investing funds in these work-based learning programs, and so what they ask us to do is really to help them close this gap. And so in other words, we have been pushed by the private sector to not only provide training programs ensuring improved work readiness, but really to show that we can place these young people in the job market. So we are pushed to work on job placement also, and so this has forced us to work on a more demand driven. And so we have we need today to be able to design and customize programs that make sense for the job markets. And so I will give you just an example. We just launched a program that is called She's Digital, which is focused on placing 7,000 vulnerable women in technology, in the knowledge economy, certifying them in cybersecurity and cloud computing. So here you have a mix of, I mean, again, they point out to the jobs of the future, because we know that these two sectors are the most in demand, sectors for job creation in the next decade. So first thing. So look at this job of the future and help them close the gap. But also, of course, this kind of program is a 7-month-long program, a very strong focus on social emotional skills and executive functional skills, like, since from collaboration, proactivity, emotional regulation, and so many factors that we know lead to sometimes people's dismissal in the work environment. Sometimes it's not technical skills, but it's more the lack of soft skills that explain why also workers leave their companies. So I would say be more demand driven, and so that we are more intelligent in designing program. And then a second trend that was mentioned along the webinar is skills-based certification. So many more companies hire based on skills, and so we do add also certifications and micro credential that help students and companies to recognize a specific skill that then is transferable across industries, across sector. Sorry, I'm not sure I was quick, but I tried to answer your question.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. I think you're very, very, very spot on answer. And also for everyone that is listening through Zoom or Facebook Live, if Yasmin, Cristina, Marcela, or Yanni, do you guys want to share any study, anything that you've been working on, or information on your projects? You can share it with me, and I will gladly share with all of our attendees. So thank you very much for that, Yasmin. Turning to you, Yanni, we have already spoken about the situation of win-win between the private sector and youth, but like very briefly, I want to ask you, how do you think we can balance between those two? Like, for example, we're not only benefiting youth, but we're not only benefiting like private sector. Like, how can we find that balance to, well, reach a win-win for both of them?
I want to say the most practical way to do that is collaborative design. So in other words, when we have programs and we are designing programs, that we do that in a collaborative way, that we have young people actually saying what they need in terms of the program design, and that we involve young people with the private sector in design and planning stages of work-based learning programs. Practically, in my country, we are very lucky in that we have a variety of different organizations representing the interest of young people. And I think it's just so important to draw all of them in when we talk about the broad strokes principles around work-based learning programs. But in practical terms, in companies as well, if we have a work-based learning program and we think that it is going well for the company and it's serving what it needs to serve, nothing prevents a company from consulting a round of people who've been through that process and who have either found work with the company or found other work, and to get their impressions of the program as well. I just think it's very important that young people's voices are heard. It's exactly the same principle as us wanting the private sector voice heard in every single stage of design of these programs.
Thank you, Yanni. Really quickly about that, you mentioned youth voices must be heard. So I'm going to turn to Marcela and ask you, well, what are some of the challenges that students may face when participating in these WBL programs, and how can this be addressed? I really want to be able to keen on this question, since you have private sector here. So share your experience and let us know how can we get better at this work-based learning programs. You have 1.5 minutes.
Well, work-based learning programs can be a valuable way for students to gain this real-world experience and develop skills that will be useful in their future careers. However, there are some challenges that students may face when participating in a work-based learning program, including this balancing work and the academics, because work-based learning can be demanding in a way and time-consuming, which can make it difficult for students to balance their work responsibilities with their academic coursework. And also, as I mentioned before, students have to learn about these technical skills and soft skills, because they are going to help with this specific job-related knowledge and abilities for that. But I remark these soft skills and this essential development of these ones because they are going to provide good communication, efficiency, and also teamwork. It is also a different dynamic compared to the university, because the university dynamic is very different from a work one, just as with the school, the dynamics were different. So students may find it challenging to adjust to a new workplace environment and culture, and to understand the expectations of their supervisors, but they have to be able to adapt to it. So, however, all of these challenges force students to learn and develop all these strategic abilities and this allow creating a productive person in a workplace. So personally, these are the challenges that I identify with, but I would like the private sector to give me constant feedback, since it is possible to learn based on trial and error, but I need feedback to be able to learn about what is necessary for working life, and also to improve, to stand out from so many people that now has a lot of academic skills.
Thank you, Marcela. I really love that answer. So we do have some work to do in that regard. Thank you for that, Marcela. And last but not least, I turn to you, Cristina, just like a wrap up of what should be the role of public-private partnerships, since I know, for example, from the Global Apprenticeship Network, we do promote a lot of these public-private alliances. So if you can elaborate on that, and please be short, because we have really short time, but please, the floor is yours, Cristina.
Thank you, Ignacio. Okay, with the time in mind, I promise I will be very concise. So I'll go back to the role that each of us has to play in terms of promoting work-based learning, whether we represent the public or the private sector, but work-based learning particularly for apprenticeships. So for example, what we need from the government is we need them to set clear legal frameworks and policies to provide also incentives for the private sector to effectively participate, to facilitate the participation of industry as well in designing work-based learning programs. What we need from employers is we need them to offer work-based learning opportunities and to scale them, and to also see the value of investing in work-based learning. We need also employers to recognize not just the value of the program, but also the individual apprentice, trainee, learner, intern as part of their overall workforce development strategy. And for social partners, we need them as well too, to safeguard the rights of apprentices and to continue to contribute also to the design and implementation of work-based learning. And on a last note, I just also want to say that our organization, Gang Global, we are also an example of a public-private partnership. We're a multi-sector alliance that convenes both public and private parties together, whether they're businesses, governments, or international organizations. We all come together to promote the concept of work-based learning, to advocate for it, particularly apprenticeship. We share best practices of our corporate members who represent industries in a variety of sectors, including food and beverage, IT, consulting, fragrance and flavors, beauty and banking. And all of our members are major companies who are offering really the most innovative work-based learning programs adapted to their industry needs. Also working with countries and employer organizations like CACIF and GAN Guatemala. We also implement and tailor country level projects, also working with the private sector, governments, and policymakers.
Thank you, Cristina. Thank you very much for that. I think GAN is a really, really good example about those alliances and how we together as such are stronger. I remember, and I want to close on this. I remember a couple of years ago, someone from the international cooperation field said to me, Ignacio, I remember this quite clearly, and I always say this, but Ignacio, there is only one way to do things right, and that is by doing them together. So I really love that phrase. So just to close this webinar, I know we're already up in time, but I would just ask each one of you to be able to just give closing remarks, 30 seconds or less. And I would start with you, Jasmine, if you could just give one last message in 30 seconds or less.
Well, last message, I like to repeat that the youth population is 20% of the world population, but 100% of our future. So I feel compelled to serve our youth and help them, have the skill set, the mindset to thrive for their communities and become, great leaders that we need for the world.
Love that, Jasmine. I'm gonna steal that phrase also. So keep that in mind. Gianni, I go with you. 30 seconds or less. Some last remarks.
Thank you so much. The private sector's active involvement in work-based learning programs ensures that these initiatives are relevant, they're effective, and they're aligned with industry needs. By bridging the gap between education and employment, the private sector helps equip young individuals with the skills and experiences required for successful careers. Thanks.
Thank you, Gianni. Go with you, Cristina. Some last remarks.
Yes, just very last remarks. It's been a pleasure speaking with all of you. I think we're all on the same page, whether we're representing young people, if we're representing education or employment practices or working with the private sector. I think we're all on the same page here. And I think, just in the spirit of this conversation, public-private partnerships, collaboration, adopting a mindset of collaboration as opposed to competition. I know that sometimes that could also be really hard when there's limited funding in this space as well too, but also to adopt these mindsets at home on a personal level. Ignacio, I love that you introduced my kids in the very beginning. I have 3 of them, 2 of them are teenagers, and so I am at that point in life as well too, where I'm advising them about future careers and also, but trying not to teach them just about what subject areas that they should be interested in, but also what are some of the skills that they're acquiring at school. And so I think that's something that is very interesting that the young generation is grappling with every day. But I still don't see it in the education system, even here in the Swiss education system.
Thank you very much, Cristina. We're still working on that. We hope we close those gaps. Marcela, I go over to you. Some last remarks.
Okay, so job searching as a university student can be challenging. So youth voices need to be heard, like Gianni said. And because of that, the solution is applying for jobs while studying through internships, because these can prepare students for future careers and provide valuable connections. But for that, students need the help from both the education sector and the private sector, especially their coordination about these work-based learning programs and the skills that they are teaching.
Thank you, Marcela. So with that in mind, I'm going to close this webinar. but not without also reminding the public sector. We're recording this, so I'm going to be sharing with all the governments, so they also know they have to work with us. And really, as I said, together we can achieve great things. So again, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. For the ones that are in Zoom and the ones that are with us through Facebook Live, thank you very much. And I'll be sure to share with you all of the studies and information on the programs that each one of you are representing today. So again, thank you very much, and have a great day, great morning, great afternoon, depending on what your time zone is. So thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, Ignacio. Nice meeting with you. And see you
Thank
next
you.
week.
Thank you, Jasmine. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.